Hi, MrMax. My name is Eloy. I also go by MrMancer. So I learned of your channel from hearing the guys at the Basic Experts stream the other day, and I wanted to offer an opinion on your thoughts on Burning Wheel. So for context, I've been playing RPGs for a long time, and I'm mostly an old school D&D player these days, although I do play multiple games. And I did go on a long journey of trying multiple games over the last 13 years, basically, which includes about 275 hours of Burning Wheel. I've run it for about 200 hours. It's almost what is that? It's like 70 episodes of 2 hours. It's actually, that's one campaign, and I've run a couple. So let's call it about 200 hours of running the game and playing in the game about 75 hours. And so I felt, I could venture an opinion on the subject. It's important to note that, Burning Wheel is not the hill I want to die on. So, take this video as friendly commentary. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, but you seem to indicate on your videos that you're having some difficulties with the game, but you're still kind of curious about learning it. So, well, here I go. Also, keep in mind that the last Burning Wheel campaign I ran ended 5 years ago, so I'm not 100% back up to speed on the game, right? Like, I listened to your videos and I leafed over my copy of the game briefly before making this reply. So, if I get something wrong, I apologize, but I don't think I will. So, my verdict and opinion on your opinion of the game is that I think you're 100% right. I think your instincts are right. It's the game is convoluted and fiddly, and it has a lot of subsystems and a lot of baroque terms and obscure language, and the tone is arrogant and all of that. Yes, all of that is there. So you're correct, but then the question is, why bother? And why did I bother to run and play this game? And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here. The short version, I suppose, is that I found that Burning Wheel does something in a very different way to all the other games I've played before. It's you run into different systems to play fantasy, right? But in a sense, they're all kind of the same, right? GM tells you something, you go there, you attack, you hit, you get hurt, you heal, and it's just a procedural thing. I don't know if I can verbalize it adequately, but I'll try in the course of this video, right? But before we go further down that road, there are a couple of clarifications on a few things that you said that I think might, may or may not interest you, but it's things that I thought. So don't focus too much on the subsystems at first. The entire game as a whole can be overwhelming, so you don't try to eat it on one bite, right? So you start slowly. The game itself tells you clearly on page 74 that you have to play the basic game a bit before you start going into subsystems. Now, I would counsel this regardless of who you are, particularly if you're learning alone, right? If you have an experienced Burning Wheel player helping you, then maybe, you can venture deeper into the weeds. But if you're trying to figure out how it works, you start slow, right? Do what Luke says, because the secret is that it's not the subsystems that are important. Is what really works, the heart of Burning Wheel, what makes it interesting, why explains why you would even bother to play this game is on those first 74 pages. And by the way, those 74 pages are free to download in the Burning Wheel store. They call them the Burning Wheel Gold Revised Hub and Spokes PDF. Because everything is a wheel in this game, right? So, you know, the hub is the central core game. It's the heart of the game. And that's the first 74 pages. And then the spokes sort of start leading you outward, and then the rim of the wheel is the subsystems, right? It's a, you know, you might think it's a bit pretentious, but it is what it is. So, it's also important to keep in mind that subsystems are, on the most part, reserved for special occasions only. Like, you don't engage in the fight subsystem every single session, right? The way we did it in my game is we reserved, and it's also what the people, the Burning Wheel headquarters people advise, right? They say, save it for special occasions. So don't use the fight subsystem for, you know, the first orc you encounter, right? You leave that to when it's a really dramatic situation, or at least an emotionally heavy, significant event. That's when you pull out the subsystems and you make it, because the subsystem, as you mentioned in fight, it's blow by blow. It's detailed micro actions. I think each volley is 3 heartbeats, which if you're agitated, 3 heartbeats is like a second and a little bit. So imagine, you know, doing a bunch of these sections over the course of 6-7 seconds. You attack, parry, you know, avoid, multiple things you can do. So, but, you know, don't worry for that to begin with. Start with the core, because whether you're going to like the game or not is highly contingent on the core. Don't worry about shades or deeds. Deed points are awarded after you complete, as the name implies, important great deeds, right? This is something big that you've been working up to, right? And so in my sessions of play, I think at most each player got 1, maybe 2 deeds points, right? Tops. Nobody got 3. I think I awarded a 3rd point at the end of the 70 session campaign, and for reference, our sessions were 2 hours, so 70 sessions for us is 140 hours, and they got their 3rd deeds point by that point, but they had spent, I think, the first couple of points already, and we never played again. So, you know, so don't worry about that, because if you're going to elevate your skill for combat, which we did once that I recall, you need deeds points, right? And in order to permanently shift your skill from the basic black shade to gray or white shade, you need to spend 3 deed points, right? So this, you know, focusing on deeds and shade shifting is like reading basic and expert D&D, and focusing on the domain rules is like your first level. Let's try to survive the first couple of rooms of the first dungeon before you start worrying about domain management and, you know, what's the upkeep for your castle that you're going to build in 3 years when you reach level 14 on old school D&D, right? Don't worry about that for now. You're not going to need it. So let's see. So again, back to the question, why? Well, it's Burning Wheel is a game which delves deep into roleplay and narrative, and it's emergent play. So both the GM and the player are surprised by what happens. It is player-driven and GM reactive, so it's almost entirely improvisational, and it's done on the fly. So you maybe bring 1 idea to each session. Luke's called this a bang, right? You could bring 1 to 3. But believe me, many was the night where I was like in the shower 30 minutes before game time. And it's like I need 1 thing to run tonight's session. And 1 thing was enough. because the beliefs is what's going to be moving the characters along, and each of them has 3, so they're each going to be constantly vying to get things done. And so because the game is driven by the players and driven by their beliefs, you get automatic player buy-in, which is something that a lot of game masters complain about, that their players aren't really interested or focused on the game. Well, this comes in with the territory, because you have to write a belief, so you're automatically invested, right? And if the player is not invested, the game is not going to progress, so you're going to sit there and look at each other, right? But as long as you have beliefs, the game will always be moving forward, because your belief tells you what you're striving for in case you forget, right? And so it's like, you'll never get the question, well, what do I do now, right? Because the answer is always pursue a belief. You got 3, pick one, right? And so what this produces, because the players are always pursuing beliefs, it means that they're driving. It means that the experience becomes a la carte, right? So it's not picked from a menu. It's an experience tailored to the player's approach and how they go about pursuing their beliefs, right? And so that's something that is difficult to provide in other systems. It's not impossible, but this game facilitates that, right? So, if you have a player who has always wanted to go on a very specific type of adventure, but the GM that you get is maybe into sandbox, or maybe has a very specific plot in mind, because that's the other way, right? Like a more 5e type of thing. And you're never going to get that specific experience that you want, right? Except if you play Burning Wheel. And I could talk endlessly about how that works, but that is the thing that drew me to it. It's like, I would like to play very specific niche experiences, and this is the game that facilitated that for me. And I'll explain at the end of the video, but let's keep going. So again, the driving of the game is made possible because the heart of the Burning Wheel is the belief and artha cycle. So artha is all the fiddly points that you talk, all the meta currency that you talk. It's fate and persona and deeds. They all fall under artha. And there's a cycle where if you pursue your beliefs, you get artha. And so you spend artha to make the chances of doing what it is that you need to accomplish easier or possible, right? And in return, you get more artha, right? So it's a cycle. It's a self-driving thing. 3 beliefs. You mentioned in one video, maybe cut down to 2. No. 3 beliefs. You want 3. Believe me, at some point you want 4, and it's like, no, 4 is too much. But the belief writing in itself is almost an art form, right? It's something that you learn, and the more you play, and the more characters you design, the better you get at it, right? But it's not as easy as it sounds. So you have 3 beliefs. Let's start with the third or least important belief. I usually do a code of conduct. Now, being the third belief and being the code of conduct does not mean that it's not important, right? But it's possibly the easiest to play, right? So what I do is a code of conduct. It could be simple, like, follow the code of chivalry, or, I don't know, a specific religious code of conduct, right? Something that you define. And so as long as you're pursuing that code of conduct, anytime you can say to the game master, look, I'm going to do this, right? Because it's my code of conduct. Right, you get a point at the end of the session, right? So it reinforces, if you have a particular play style, right? Maybe it's the pirate code of the open seas, whatever it is. If you're going to play like that anyway, that we call that an artha mine. You're mining artha. It's going to keep going, right? You're going to get more points. As long as you can tap into that, you have to demonstrate and role play that to get your bonus artha, right? The other second type of belief is make a belief about another character, right? And so you could have a belief like, the other player character, he's my brother, right? And I will protect him at all costs, right? And then that belief will be challenged, right? That means that, you might have a goal to do something, but your little brother's in trouble, right? And now so you have to choose. Do I pursue this or do I help my little brother, right? And so you either pursue your belief or you betray it, right? So it makes for passionate role-playing, right? In Mouse Guard, which is a derivative of Burning Wheel, it's fight for what you believe in is the tagline, right? Because you will fight, right? Do you really mean to tell me that you're putting your brother above anything else? And then you get to make a hard choice, right? Because maybe your other belief, maybe it means you have to betray your precious honor to save your baby brother. So which is it, right? That's a hard choice. And so, you might wind up betraying one belief in favor of another. And so beliefs are dynamic. You can write them and rewrite them, right? And the funny thing about the game is if you break a belief, like maybe you broke your honor to save your little brother, you still get an award at the end of the session for having broken your belief, right? You shouldn't do it lightly, but you can do it. You get a bonus artha, right? A persona point, and then you get to write a new belief to take its place. Now that you've broken your honor, what's left? What's in there? Maybe your belief is, I will reclaim my honor, right? And so now your character moves in a different direction in life, right? And so the main belief, I call it the quest belief also, right? Is where you state a goal that you have. And, if you look at Mouse Guard, for example, calls them beliefs, instincts, and goals, right? So the goal is something that you're trying to accomplish, right? So maybe my goal is my father thinks I'm useless. I will prove my mettle to him, and I will begin by doing X, right? And X is whatever you want. Maybe I'll go into the forest and I'll hunt a bear by myself with a spear, or I'll hunt a boar with a spear by myself, which will prove my worth to my father as a warrior. Or maybe it's something with steps, right? Maybe my father has been exiled by the evil baron, right? And so my quest is, I will avenge my father's honor upon the foul baron, and I will start by getting together a troop of thieves, and we will raid the baron's cattle and steal it. And after we do that, then you rewrite the belief. Now I have a band of thieves. Now we will go and set fire to the baron's manor. And the beliefs evolve, but the ultimate expression of the belief is I will restore my father's honor, right? And so you rewrite the belief as you accomplish steps on it. And so it's a dynamic process. And again, you should be able to see that this is what's driving play right now, is this pursuit of these beliefs. Again, this is a whole video, right? Talking about beliefs. If you're really interested, this is a 3-hour conversation, right? So suffice it to say, that's the heart of Burning Wheel, the belief in artha. Because the artha motivates you to pursue the belief. And when you pursue the belief, you get the points, the artha, which helps you accomplish the belief, right? And so it's always in motion. And the GM is reacting. It's like suddenly, oh, whoa, he's going to set fire to the manor? Oh, cool. That means, let me see, what does the manor's, the baron's castle look like, right? And so you start imagining and you start populating it with guards. And what if the baron's daughter is inside the keep? Are you going to set fire to it, right? And that could be a place where it would challenge the player's belief, where I thought you were an honorable guy. You're going to burn down this house with this women and children in it? Really? Is that where we're going? Is that honorable? And so again, you get this choice. Do I follow my honor? Do I pursue vengeance, right? And so this is the type of play that you get. So this is, transcends things like alignment. And the good thing is that this is all self-imposed. These are your beliefs that you wrote, that you said that you wanted to do. I am the GM. I'm just putting stuff in your way to consider and playing your beliefs against each other to force you to make hard choices. So that's how that works. The other important thing is the intent and task system of resolution. Now, this is an abstraction, and it's a simple mechanic, right? And this is why you play the basic version of the game first, is to learn about the belief artha cycle, but also to learn how to resolve situations, because part of the beauty of Burning Wheel is that most of the time you use the simple mechanics. Again, you save the fiddly bits like fight. Maybe you save it for when you finally confront the Baron directly and you're in a duel, right, with him with swords. Now it's a very dramatic thing. You're not fighting his guards outside, right? You're fighting him on the stairs, on the keep, right? So now you break out fight. And now we spend the entire session just going through the fight blow by blow. And maybe you kill him on the first one. Maybe he wounds you mortally on the first one. You don't know, right? But that's when the big system comes in. But for most of the time, it's intent and task. And how does this work? Well, you say what you want to do and the reason you want to do it, right? It's not, I roll a perception check, right? Is I want to look to see if there's this thing here. Or because it's an abstraction, I'll give an example from one of my games. There was a thief snuck into a bureaucrat's office, and he wanted to set fire to a bunch of documents, right? And so while he's doing that, the bureaucrat opens the door, right? And so he realizes that he's snuck in here, but if the bureaucrat yells for help, he's dead, right? Because they're going to bring guards and stuff. And so he says, well, I said, what is your plan at this point, right? He could have said, I jump out the window. He could have said, I steal the ledger and try to run or rush past the guy. And he said, no. What I want to do is I want to, get my dagger and kill this guy before he can give out the alarm. And so you think, well, if you were D&D, you would have to roll initiative and check that you have enough movement to get to the guy and hit him and inflict enough damage to kill him. Now, hopefully it's a bureaucrat, so that's an NPC, so it's probably 1 or 2 hit points, right? So a dagger should do it. But you never know. It's D&D. It might be a 3rd level bureaucrat, right? And in which case, a dagger is not going to do it. But what we did is we abstracted the situation. I said, your intent is to go in there as fast as possible, kill this guy as quietly as possible before he can raise the alarm. And so we abstracted it to a simple roll of the character's speed versus an obstacle. And so, and as an aside, obstacle, nothing wrong with the word obstacle because it's abbreviated to OB. So it's usually, it's an OB4 test, right? Or OB6 or whatever it is. You could also say TN6 or whatever, but, you get used to it. It's an OB3 test, right? And so, I don't remember what the values were, but he rolled against it. And the other thing is the intent and task. So he told me what he wanted. So I boiled it down. I abstracted it to a task, which is to roll his speed versus a target number, right? I could have said you could roll your speed versus his speed or whatever it is. Task is boiling down the intent to something to roll, right? And so it allows you to take complex situations like this one, which might take several rolls in D&D to resolve, and just boil it down to a single roll. And so that's what we did, right? I know what his intent. I tell him the task, and then I tell him what happens if he wins and what happens if he loses. I said, well, your intent is to kill him before he gives the alarm. So if you succeed, you do that. You manage to get to him and kill him before he gives the alarm. But if you fail, then maybe you stab him and kill him anyway, but he's going to scream as he's dying, right? You're not going to be able to kill him before he lets out a warning, and so guards might be coming. And so then he agrees to the test, and because I have explained the consequences, both good and bad, he can decide how much meta currency to spend to do this action to ensure that he succeeds, right? If it means something to him. He may not care and just go, screw it, I'll just roll. I'm not going to spend currency on it. Not going to spend artha. That's your decision because you're the player, you're in control, right? I only told you what the ob was. And, we boiled down your intent into a task. And I like that. I like the ability to abstract. Now, the caveat to that is it might get too abstract, right? And so it may not be to your taste. And it also maybe gets a little bit too meta, right? Because now we've discussed even success and failure states before you have rolled. And some people don't like that. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly valid. And so again, for most of the games that I ran, we mostly did simple skill tests versus obs or simple opposed rolls. Like if you wanted to lie to somebody to get something, we would do like a falsehood test versus the target's will or something like that. But again, if it was a dramatically appropriate, special, weighty, important task, then that's when you break out subsystems, right? We routinely used persuasion to convince people of something. Persuasion versus will is a simple roll. But I would ask my players, do we think this is worthy of an entire duel of wits, or do we just go simple roll with this? And, most of the time it would be like, no, go simple. I don't really care about this guy. But when it was something big, it was, okay, this is a duel of wits now. So yeah. So once you have the basic game down, then you can maybe expand, and I would recommend duel of wits first. And again, this is a very lengthy subject. I could do 3 hours on how duel of wits works, but suffice it to say, I would start there because it's a lot of fun. And so, weaknesses. What is bad for this game? It's a fiddly system. We said it already. Number 2 is it's got bad monsters. It doesn't have enough monsters. The monsters are too powerful in most ways, and so defeating them can seem very difficult. So I gave up on the idea of using monsters, and I mostly ran a human-centric world, right? The other point is the abstraction and the meta currency. It can make you feel removed from roleplay. So that's important. Another weakness, fight subsystem takes time, so I only use it for climactic battles. Same for duel of wits, right? Once you're going into duel of wits, it's going to take a while. It's fun, but save it for the important stuff. And even the designers will tell you that this is the correct way to go. The game is bad for mysteries, but you can do it. It's just not the best system for GM, please surprise me with something, because it's player driven. And so in my opinion, I think it's best for human-centric fantasy games, which are heavy on intrigue. But you could also do dwarf or elf-focused games, right? It's if you go beyond humans, then it gets more complicated. So to me, it's ideal to play something like Game of Thrones, right? It's particularly well suited to that because it's mostly diplomacy. It's mostly duel of wits, with some brief sections of brutal action, right? Which again, you can run abstracted, bloody versus described in the book, or you can go fully, you can do versus, you can do bloody versus, you can do full fight, depending on the importance of this encounter, right? What else? And so, again, who is it for? Do you have a specific game in mind, right? Have you always wanted to play a specific game where fledgling wizards have come to compete to earn an apprenticeship? Or a game where you want to get involved fighting off an invasion of inhuman invaders from across the sea, right? Or go on a quest to recover a specific item. Have you as a player had dreams and expectations of going on a grand adventure where you're meeting kings and queens and you're traveling the world and it's an epic quest type of thing, but then you're stuck playing one of these games where the GM, is just planning to run you through killing rats in the cellar, or they have a very specific adventure in mind that has nothing to do with the epic quest that you have in your brain? Well, that's the GM is driving that game, not the player. So consider a player-driven game with a reactive GM. Benefit to the GM, no prep. You just show up with like one bang. Tonight the Baron is going to kidnap the dad, right? And so you're not expecting that, but that's going to happen during tonight's game. That might mess up your plans. That might make you question your beliefs and change them and maybe betray them. And that's where the magic of Burning Wheel lies. And again, nothing wrong with killing rats in the cellars. I do it too. I love dungeon crawl games. I love stories too. I'm an OSR player, man. So I love multiple games. So maybe consider trying the base game. It's not for everybody. And these days I don't even play Burning Wheel anymore. I've done a lot of the things that I wanted to do with it. And I found my true joy and pleasure in, old school games. Like these days, I play Hyperborea, 3rd edition a lot. And now I'm reading Adventure Conqueror King. And I'm liking what I'm reading. So, whatever floats your boat, man. Again, not here to really convince you to do one thing or the other. But I thought this might help. And oh my God, we're past half an hour, so I'm going to end it here. Any questions? If you want any further discussion in this, maybe I can do additional videos, or, you let me know. So take care, and again, nice meeting you. Bye-bye.